gaming is as big of an opportunity as buying Ethereum at $1.
But you literally only need one. We also see the Japanese Prime Minister saying that Web3 gaming and NFTs is a core national business interest for the next year. You have Korea opening up massively to Web3 gaming. You have Hong Kong capital markets opening up, which means that China has tacitly approved a lot of this.
China has re-entered the chat. Today we go deep with the founder and CEO of Immutable and the creator of the Immutable X Layer 2 protocol on Ethereum and one of the hottest and most important gaming projects in the entire crypto space. This is a huge episode where Robbie spells out some of the biggest opportunities and some of the biggest current challenges with crypto gaming, explaining exactly why the huge crypto gaming bull run that you all know I'm excited for hasn't quite materialized yet, and giving us some cookie crumbs from behind the scenes as to where the biggest breakthroughs are about to happen. As I make clear in the video, I am a seed investor in Immutable X, and so I do hold a significant chunk of Immutable X tokens. I've been holding them for a few years now, and I've never sold any. I'm excited for the future of this project, but I just want you all to know that I do have upside in this project. I think it's important that you know whenever I have any financial upside in something I discuss here on the channel. If you guys are excited about that, smash like for transparency, and let's dive in to this interview with Robbie from IMX. Welcome to the channel, Robbie from Immutable X. How you doing?
Good, Elliot. Good to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for coming on. Obviously, for those who don't know, Robbie runs, in my opinion, one of the most important gaming projects in the entire crypto space. And you've been actually pursuing this dream of crypto gaming since early 2017, maybe even before then. Maybe you could give me some background on sort of just a little bit of how you've seen this art grow. But you're one of the first names I've ever seen even talk about crypto gaming. And so I actually owe it to you for opening my eyes a little bit to this world of possibilities.
Yeah, it feels like an age ago, but maybe the bit of history on me, I've been building technology companies for the last decade, taught myself how to code at a pretty young age and started building software companies with my brother. And we became pretty obsessed with Ethereum when it came out. We were involved in Bitcoin in 2014. I thought it was fine. But when Ethereum came out, we basically became obsessed. And that was because you could build with it. You could actually show applications where the end users could be owners. And this is not directly related to gaming, but the thing that really sold me on Ethereum was one of the examples they first came out with is you could have Uber, but owned by the rider operators rather than by shareholders, where the 30% fees could be massively reduced and instead given out to every owner of that network rather than a single corporate entity. And although we haven't seen the physical integration yet play out, we have seen that literally play out many times in terms of smart contracts with financial applications. Uniswap is a good example of an exchange that is decentralized. Illuvium is a good example of a game where players themselves can be the value owners and creators in that network. And my conviction is that the majority of financial infrastructure will trend toward this over time. And so that was what first excited me about it. The question was then, what will be the actual first mainstream application? Because back then there wasn't much. It was payments. And honestly, I would say today it is still payments. It's the only mainstream application of crypto today. But what my conviction was back then and what it still is today is that gaming will be the first breakout vertical. And the reason we started in gaming back in 2017 in Web3 is, at that point, I think we had written the white paper for what we were calling the Distributed Autonomous Bank, or DAB, which was basically a lending protocol very similar to Compound. And we were about to launch it when the 5 ICOs we saw went to 100, went to 300, and we got very cold feet about the space. We thought there was a bunch of scammy activity, that none of this stuff was compliant, and we fundamentally wanted to build a business that would be there for the long term, that had utility, that was not speculative. And at the same time, CryptoPunks came out, which was the first ever primitive of an NFT. And it was pretty obvious that if you could take the fundamental value proposition of blockchain, which is the ability to truly self-custodially own digital value and to make it scarce and to make it governed in ways that were predictable and could be set out and not changed, that taking that to unique assets, aka digital goods in games, or the trillions of dollars of unique value we trade, would be the first breakout use. And we basically thought, well, gamers spend 100 billion US dollars. That was back then. Now it's closer to 150 on in-game items every single year. It is by far the biggest chunk of gaming monetization, and they get $0 for it. Taking that and allowing people to own and trade it seems like a pretty obvious use case. And I think we've seen that thesis bear out, where we've seen the investing run over the past 2.5 years. Now, over the next 12 to 18 months, we're going to see the production run, where a lot of these games come to life. So we can talk through a lot of these trends today, but I have a lot of conviction in this thesis today. There was a stat that came out from some Delphi digital analysis that Counter-Strike Go alone has done $40 billion in trading volume on skins in the last 3 years. This is on a platform that takes 15% rake, that regularly changes the rules on its end consumers, and bankrupted a third-party skins marketplace by trade locking assets back in 2018. And that's a perfect example of, this is not a speculative use case. This is just taking something gamers already want and fixing it and giving them 10 times value for it.
So I want to rewind a little bit, because you threw out a ton of value there. When I first got in the space, I was maybe lucky or unlucky, but I came in post Ethereum existing and immediately was drawn because I had been working in startup tech for 8 years. And the idea that we could build something in a new arena that wasn't so saturated was extremely exciting. And I was fascinated. Oh, they're going to do Uber on the blockchain. No intermediaries. They're going to do this on the blockchain. Every top 10 app website, but no intermediaries. It seemed like a heaven sent. And then you realize, oh, no. A lot of those work really well with intermediaries, and that it's just probably not going to be that easy to disintermediate them. However, there's one part here that I think could work. And it was in the 2018 bear market, I became convinced that no one cares about this stuff, but gamers will, because gamers already spend the money on this. And it became clear to me that gaming is as big of an opportunity as buying Ethereum at $1, as buying Bitcoin at $1. I think it's really that early for the Web3 gaming space. And I think the opportunity could be life-changing for so many individuals, as well as just a net positive for the world. But why have we not seen it yet? I think that's where the community's at right now, is they are so done with the promises, the words. They want to see it. They want to taste it. They want to experience it. So from your perspective, seeing so many deals, seeing so many companies and projects, why haven't we seen it yet?
So my answer to this a year ago would have been the infrastructure to onboard players was not yet there. I think we're now just about solving that. The remaining last silo before we'll see this huge influx is just successful hit content. And I'll break down how I think about this. So I think in order for Web3 gaming to become mainstream, I would argue there's 4 things that need to be solved. The first is user onboarding and experience must be good. Right now it is trash. In order for you to sign up and play a game, you must download a wallet that requires you to store 24 seed words. You must learn what a private key is. The amount of user friction and onboarding in order to take a customer and onboard them into a game and the actual digital ownership is far too high. And if you know anything about gaming, the most important thing is, what is your conversion funnel on turning cash on marketing spend into players who play your game? Now, there are a lot of promising things about Web3 and improving that funnel. When a gamer owns an asset, rather than just renting it in a database, they retain far more. When you can sell that asset, they spend way more. We're fundamentally improving a lot of the most important factors in that equation. But the biggest problem is user acquisition drop off. 98% of users are lost when you require them to install a wallet. So I think this is actually now basically getting solved. Many people are working on this. We just released Immutable Passport. You can sign up with a wallet in 10 seconds. You can go to the Dev Hub. I'll drop a link in the comments and literally sign up in that time. So I think this is now getting to the point where this should be a solved problem in the next 6 months. Next thing is developer experience, which is, how do we make it easy for game devs to build? Again, I think this was terrible. The reason we built Immutable as a platform in the first place is we built the first ever multiplayer game on any blockchain in December 2017. And we realized that there was demand for this, but it was almost impossible for game developers to build. Building with smart contracts is like building with, punch card computing back in the 60s. And we realized you have to make this like Stripe and make it incredibly, incredibly easy for game developers to build without knowing detailed blockchain code. And again, this is really our approach. How can we simplify this 0 to 1 for developers? Many people are working on this. I think this is getting to the point where it's become good enough. The third thing I would say is economies must become easy for game developers to build. This is not yet solved. This is the problem of, when Axie launched and had massive success, you had 100 copycats immediately after it. Steppen, which was the move to earn, which relied on a lot of the same underlying economic principles. Unfortunately, that growth was flawed. It was relied on, Ponzi-like dynamics, and it was just one iteration. If that had worked, we would see it being mainstream today, because all of these games would have had a scalable economy with growth that worked. What we really need is a safe implementation of how you build an economy that people can own things, how that can drive user growth, that will be sustainable and won't collapse at some point. And this is the exact same trend we've observed in every major shift in gaming distribution over the past 2 decades. When social gaming on Facebook became huge, it was only after you had 2 or 3 key hits and they developed the playbooks everyone else could copy. Farmville or Mafia Wars was cloned hundreds of times because they developed playbooks that were reliable ways to use that new distribution to make a better game than the older models. We need the same thing for Web3. Hey, here's how you do a Web3 MMO or a Web3 action RPG or trading card game. And that's what we're working on with Immutable Publishing. Every single game that launches, if it's successful, is a chance at creating that playbook for everyone. So I think that will be a significant catalyst. This takes me to the fourth and most important one as to why it's not here is production timelines. So if you look at the history of Web3 gaming, up until 2.5 years ago, no one knew what it was. 2 years ago, no one even really knew what an NFT was, right? Until we had the craze in early 2021 with NFTs and collectibles and art. And before that, literally, if we mentioned the word NFT to someone, they didn't know what it was. They didn't have impressions for good or for bad. Over the last 2.5 years, we've seen $15 billion invested into Web3 gaming. That's not a magic number. It's a very serious number. It's pretty much more than any classic change in gaming distribution. It's more than what was invested into social gaming in the first few years, in mobile gaming in the first few years. And this means there are a lot of shots on goal now. For context, the last Call of Duty, which had hundreds of millions of players, had a budget of roughly $200 million. And so you have 5 times 15, which is 75 shots on goal now from essentially this funding at having a mainstream hit. And so the reason we haven't seen these
good quick math, by the way, there.
Yeah, I was stressing. But the reason we haven't yet seen this is the production timelines on games is 2 to 4 years. And especially a lot of the early game developers weren't actually Web2 game developers who were very practiced at building games. They were often the Web3 pioneers who were like, gaming is awesome, we're going to build something from scratch. And that means that their timelines are going to be less reliable. We're now seeing the majority of new games coming into this space as successful Web2 game developers wanting to do something differently. The Machine Zone founder, who led one of the most innovative gaming companies of all time, is banking entirely on Web3 with Digidaiku, Gabe Layden. You have literally Nexon, the 5th largest gaming company in the world, putting their flagship IP on Web3. But all of this stuff takes time. So we have pretty good insights into this. Across the platform, we've got hundreds of games. We track their go live times meticulously. Our expectation is over the next 6 to 18 months, we're going to see 40% of these games launch. And some percentage of those, a small percent, 5 to 10%, will be hits. So really the timeline we're looking at for the first few credible hits to go live is the next 6 to 18 months. And you only need one. And this is the other thing I'll say is we should not expect every game to be successful because every game in Web 2 is not successful. The failure rate on games is enormous. But the games that are successful are hits. It's an entirely idiosyncratic risk profile. If you add on the complexity of building a Web3 game, we should expect that failure rate to be even higher. But you literally only need one where you have 100 million players, which is not a huge game. It's just a reasonably sized game. And suddenly you've tripled the active user base of Web3 overnight. And you've proven out a model that, thousands of game developers are going to flock to. So this is basically the reason that we're going to see it over the next year and a half. And we're pretty excited for this. And we're doing as much as we can to remove the roadblocks so that the game that would have a 50% chance of failing or succeeding, we can now edge toward the success metric because they have more economies to build on. Their user onboarding is easier. We want to make everything that isn't the core task of building a high quality game very simple for them to do.
So just to recap here, obviously the concept of building a hit game isn't unfamiliar. The concept that it takes a few years isn't unfamiliar, but you hit on a few points. One, the only successful quote game that we have really is Axie. Axie was effectively a Ponzi, right? It ended up rewarding users and people were playing it for the money coming out of it, not for the game experience. That was what went viral. It was, hey, look, we can make money doing this. And once the money dried up, the experience dried up. So fundamentally, one, we still haven't seen the model, right? And I think that that's something that I haven't heard talked about so much, which is, look, you have these Farmville Facebook games and those went viral and there was a model and you just followed it, right? You have Fortnite, there's a model, you follow it, right? And so you have these examples of successful models that you don't see yet replicated because Web3 has so much permanence, so much long-term consequences to every design mechanic within the economy that we still don't know how it impacts at scale these decisions when you have 10,000 to 20,000 users versus 10 million to 20 million users. So really good point there. So we need to hit the model. Once the model's hit, we can now essentially we've done the alchemy and we can now carbon copy it. But that doesn't address the final part, which is the content. I mean, in the end, the way I see it is it takes a while to make games, but the real people who are passionate about gaming will create awesome games. And the thing that's been missing is that everyone's been coming at it from the angle of, oh, let's just slap on some gameplay to this sort of economic model or slap on a sort of whatever, but nobody's come at it and said, I'm just so passionate about this game and I want to build this game and we're going to do things like give ownership, right? And I think that that's the era we're in right now where people are like, no, this is my dream game. Like this is a game I want to build. A founder that I talked to has launched over $3 billion in revenue. Household name, I'm not going to name them here, but they've launched household titles, gaming titles, and they're so passionate about this new type of game they're going to build, and they're adding Web3 to it. But you could do it without the Web3, but they just wanted to build this game forever, and it's their passion project. And I think that that's, to me, the era that we're in, which is people are seeing they're building something where if you stripped all the Web3 out of it, it would still be cool, still be awesome. And there just hasn't been that passion yet. And quite frankly, I think like this era only began with Axie, right? Because before that, there was no reason for people to take this space that seriously. So when do you think we'll start seeing the sort of fruits of this? You said 12 to 18 months. Is that we'll start seeing them kind of start peeking their heads out? Or do you think within 18 months,
you'll see
like
them
it's going to be a launch?
Look, first triple A game off the press is going to be Illuvium, and it's launching at the end of this year, right? So there's one data point. We're super excited about those. I highly recommend if you're watching this, try and play the beta, particularly the Auto Battler, I think is the best or most mature game mode right now. This stuff is real and it's fun. I think it's comparable to TFT. They have to get the metagame loop in. But you touched on something else, which is the other metric we need to look at is, was this just a flash in the pan series of investments? Or is there continuous game developers who are choosing to build using this technology? And we see this firsthand because the number of games that we've been onboarding onto Immutable has doubled since the start of the year. The number of high quality games we've seen is more than ever. We have Nexon literally choosing to build one of their flagship IPs on the blockchain. You now have NFTs inside of Fortnite. You have EVE Online, which is one of the most successful hardcore examples of an economy-driven game where players fundamentally care about the rights that they get, choosing to build entirely on Web3 with Ilmar at the helm of that and CCP. You have some huge studios who are choosing to build on Web3, especially in Japan and Korea. And because it's not a bull run, they don't feel the need to beat their chests and talk particularly loudly around this right now or do these massive primary sales because they're just building in order to actually have a sustainable game rather than, as you say, slapping some sort of gaming experience on an economy. And that's the stuff we're really excited about, right? Like the reason why we've never touched collectibles or PFP projects isn't because we don't like them. I think they're fine and they have value propositions, but they're not repeatable volume. They're not repeatable businesses that can be grown and make a big impact on the world with guaranteed growth. They're kind of flash in the pan and they're highly speculatively driven. What we're interested in is a game where you can put more money into marketing and it grows. And as it grows, we're empowering more players to own part of an experience rather than just to have value extracted from them. I think one of the best examples of this is Gabe Layden, who founded Machine Zone. And Gabe pioneered how do you spend billions of dollars on performance marketing on mobile games. He's literally spent more money on sort of Google ads. He had the Super Bowl ads with Arnie Schwarzenegger for his games. And what his view is he was entirely whale monetized. The consumers whose games would spend tens of thousands of dollars, and is like, how could I do that but actually give them value for what they're spending, rather than just extracting this? And I think that's one of the beautiful models, and also one of the beautiful monetization models of this, is that we can now have these people who are spending what they want to spend on these games, but they're becoming an important part of the ecosystem. They're owning a guild, they're a landowner, they have some portion of value in the future piece of this game. The final thing I'll touch on is the consumer sentiment toward Web3 gaming. And I get this question a lot. Why do gamers hate Web3? And my answer is, well, first, that sentiment is exclusively to the West. If you look at Asia, which are some of the biggest gaming markets in the world, Japan, Korea, they are completely pro Web3. They're very used to spending money on in-game monetization. The free-to-play monetization model is actually fairly dominant in the West, and Asia monetization is much more around trading power, and that's what they like. We also see the Japanese Prime Minister saying that Web3 gaming and NFTs is a core national business interest for the next year. You have Korea opening up massively to Web3 gaming. You have Hong Kong capital markets opening up, which means that China has tacitly approved a lot of this. And Hong Kong government literally just created a $50 million Web3 marketing fund. So we're seeing trends geographically that are extremely bullish in terms of tailwinds for the gaming sector as well. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying the biggest 5 gaming companies in the world are switching their monetization overnight to Web3. It makes zero sense. Why would you disrupt yourself with a model that is risky for what your moat will look like in the future? But some of them are, and all of them are experimenting, because they must ensure that if this becomes the next standard that gamers demand, they say, hey, I don't want to pay $50 for a skin that I never see again. I don't want to buy a skin in Warzone 1 that doesn't transfer into Warzone 2, or be trade locked on my Counter-Strike Go, knife skins. We can actually start to see these games preparing to make sure that they have the model to succeed in that new world. And that's exactly what you see in a classic innovator's dilemma or disruption paradigm. So look, the data, and that's all I can share, right? I'm not here to kind of speak about things that we don't know about. It's all of the trends that we've seen have continued increasing. This is by far the best bear run we've had in terms of development activity. And what I think, we should be looking out for is, we shouldn't be telling Web2 gamers, hey, love this technology. We should just be building incredible experiences where under the hood, they get asset ownership and they never even know it's an NFT.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think you pointed out something huge there, which is we have once again re-entered, and China has re-entered the chat, if you will. And this was, if people don't recall, 95% of cryptocurrency activity was at one point housed in China in the early days. Crypto is very much
every bull runs
Eastern
in China
phenomenon.
Right?
Everything. And people believe that the last bull run wasn't as much of a real one because China wasn't as literally sort of, they were there, but they weren't as sort of explicitly there. And so what we see, like the opportunity brought to the table by China embracing not only cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, but also Web3 gaming is kind of inexplicably large. And I'm so glad you brought that up. I also bring up the fact that gamers are just sort of by nature, a little bit stubborn. And they threw, a complete tantrum, outrage, hysteria when microtransactions were introduced. And now every single gamer engages in microtransactions happily. And what they don't realize is that this is actually taking back that model and sort of making it more just and more player friendly. It's sort of going the other way on the player friendly spectrum. And as soon as they play Dead Drop, as soon as they play Illuvium, as soon as they play any of these hit games coming, they will then experience it, and seeing is believing. And so I believe that as soon as the influencers switch over, the content creators, it will become this strong opinion loosely held that they then flip on, and they'll go, oh, actually, I feel strongly that I like NFTs. And so it is one of the biggest cultural shifts as well as economic opportunities. To that effect, you guys have built an absolute monstrous machine over at Immutable. And when you started, you obviously, I knew you guys in the pre-Immutable days, but as you evolved past a single game into a platform, and your vision was, hey, look, Ethereum has to be native on Ethereum. It has to be an ETH housed phenomenon, because this is really the only true builders blockchain that we've seen. Others are very interesting, but ETH is home, and we just need to do it way cheaper. We need to make it easier. Where are you guys today? Because you've gone through so many phases, and I will say, full disclosure for the audience, I'm a seed investor for Immutable X. I've never sold an Immutable X. I'm still holding strong. I'm a believer in Robbie and his team, but that's an aside. Please tell me and the audience, like, what's going on with Immutable, because you guys are always cooking up some astronomically big plans, and I just love to know sort of what you guys see as the most important problems you guys are solving right now.
Yeah, it's a great thing. Maybe I'll start with a bit of our general philosophy to what we're building, which is, we think gaming is one of the most important industries in the world. There's 3.1 billion gamers. They spend $150 billion on in-game assets every year, and it's growing at 10% year on year. Gaming is bigger than music, movies, and TV combined. This is not some silly toy we're playing with. This is how people will predominantly live their lives in terms of entertainment. There's increasingly socialization happening in gaming. And our eventual view is that pretty much all forms of work or play will be in some form of interactive entertainment. Apple came out with their Vision Pro 2 weeks ago. It's pretty clear that augmented or fully virtual reality is humans' digital future over the next few decades. That makes the work that blockchain is doing to define how you own digital stuff incredibly important. And so we've always taken the philosophical stance of, if this is going to be the main way that consumers are onboarded, we want to do it right. We don't want to do this with a database 2.0 or an app store 2.0. We want to make sure that the property rights, the economics are all done in a way that is long-term sustainable and good for people and their sense of ownership. And so let's boil that down into what that means. Number one, we always wanted to build on open, decentralized, and secure technology. That's why we always chose Ethereum to build on. The reason we did that, it was fairly pragmatic. Ethereum is by far the most decentralized chain. It has the most adoption. It's the most secure. Recently, with their proof of stake upgrade, they got past the point that anyone could really attack them. Like, pretty much no state actor, even with a concerted effort, could take down Ethereum today, because it's just far too expensive in terms of slashing risk and to acquire the ETH required. Whereas with mining, you probably could have executed a 51% attack if you were a significantly sort of budgeted actor. And this was fairly contrarian. Back in 2018, Elliot, as you know, like, the most popular thing to do if you were building a platform was to build an ETH killer. It was by far the most investable thesis. VCs would throw money at you. And our view was always, we wanted to scale and build on this rather than compete directly with Ethereum. And the second thing we wanted was, if we're scaling on it, we didn't want to use insecure technology. And believe me, we tried everything. We built internal prototypes of state channels, of Plasma. Nothing worked there. Obviously, those teams ended up maturing into different L2s. And the first thing we ever thought that satisfied this decentralization and scaling dilemma sufficiently was ZK rollups. And we were basically the first production implementation of ZK rollups with Immutable X back in 2021, 2022. And now we're launching with Polygon the Immutable ZK EVM to really combine what we think is the best scaling protocol with the best gaming platform and simplify the choices for developers a lot. Because ultimately, we don't want developers to be choosing the wrong scaling solution or the wrong lens of self-custody or decentralization because they have these other shiny objects. We just have to make it very, very simple for them. And that leads me into my kind of third point, which ties into a lot of what we've seen with Ledger and custody over the past few months. And that is, self-custody is really important for us as a default, and it's something that we offer. Now, if users want to use a different solution, they always can. But the reason we built Immutable Passport to be self-custodial, but also with email sign-on, was we think it's incredibly important to balance user experience while never undermining the fact that users should own their own stuff. It shouldn't be stored on someone else's keys. It shouldn't be on one giant server. It should be in a way that you can ultimately take away those assets and no one ever can take them from you. I think that's particularly important given the regulatory environment we're seeing, where the likelihood that you have assets seized is higher than ever. So that's kind of our philosophical approach to the space. In terms of recent moves, the most significant thing is this partnership with Polygon, where essentially we're working together to build the default platform for gamers and game developers. We launched this, I think, 2-3 months ago now, and the metrics we've seen have been pretty insane. We're doing 2 to 3 times the amount of gaming deals. We have, the best quote I heard was, many game developers in the first week said, well, we were choosing between Immutable and Polygon, and now we no longer have to make that choice. And that's exactly what we want, because game developers shouldn't have to worry about what blockchain do I use? What type of decentralization or scaling mechanism do I use? How do I make gas fees work? How do I make my economy work? They should just focus on building brilliant games. And that's the best thing we can do to accelerate the timeline of this industry.
Yeah, I think it's extremely well put, and quite honestly, transparently, I'm rooting for you guys tremendously. I really enjoyed catching up with you. Obviously, I think some of the most important points you pulled out here are the interest from Asia, the time to market, and the fact that we are entering the beginning of the real phase of this, where we've had the excitement, we've had the sort of realization, now we've had the funding round, the trough of disillusionment, and now we're building back up, and we'll start seeing real stuff that isn't make believe, it isn't promise driven, it isn't hype driven, but it is player driven, and it's a really exciting thing. Any final words? And we'd love to have you guys back on the show to check in with you as we trudge through this new cycle.
Look, I would say if you're a game developer, come to immutable.com. We'd love to help you build. We've got a 100+ go-to-market team that'll help you build your game design, build your economy, go-to-market, all of that jazz. If you're a player, come check out the games. Come download the Immutable Passport and give us your feedback. We iterate at a very fast speed. And I would just say, I think the next 6 to 18 months will speak for themselves. We don't need to kind of sell over our skis here. It's just, let's build exceptional games and have people use them. But it seems very likely that the next few mainstream hits are going to coincide with the next bull run. And I think that will be a major driver of the next narrative. We've had every bull run has really been dictated or dominated by a particular narrative. And I think real utility and real use cases for hundreds of millions of players is something that is going to be pretty unstoppable in the next one. So we're definitely excited.
The gaming bull run. I can't wait. Thank you so much, Robbie.
Thanks, Elliot.
Well, there you have it. One of the biggest gaming founders in the entire space explaining 4 critical pillars to success for crypto gaming. I personally can't be more excited for the future of this particular niche in this industry. I think it is the biggest opportunity in front of all of us. And I'm so excited to cover this evolving space over the coming days, months, and years. As always, I'm EllioTrades, and I'll see you very soon on the next episode.